Hi, my name is Dottie Baumgarten, and I am an educator for the Philadelphia Water Department. I've been working with the Water Department since 2009, and I'm able to talk about topics with the public and with schools. I've done tours at the sewage treatment plant, the drinking water treatment plant, and I help teachers connect to some of the resources that the Water Department has so that you can use resources to educate your children, as well as talk to public groups at events or in these kind of talks. So I'm glad to be with you today. I'm glad you could be part of this presentation. I'm doing this for the Friends of the Wissahickon, and we'll cover several topics that are key to understanding the water that you are using. So we're going to start with what a watershed is. We're going to start with the responsibility that the Water Department has. We'll continue with topics of interest such as stormwater management and combined sewer. We're going to hit some topics that are specific to the Wissahickon and then end up talking about climate change. When we're talking about climate change, I'm relying heavily on slides and information from Abby Sullivan, who is the expert on this topic with the Philadelphia Water Department. So when we talk about water and when we talk about the water that we're drinking right here, I want you to be mindful of what a watershed is. Now, you may have heard the word watershed before, but many of us really don't understand what a watershed is. So let's take the word apart. You all know what water is. What's a shed? Most of the time when you think of a shed, you're going to direct your mind to a building that is holding tools in your backyard. That's not the kind of way we're using the word shed in this watershed word. I want you to think about a dog shedding hair, or a spider shedding skin, or when you rub your hand, the skin on your hand, the dried skin on your hand falls off and you're shedding dried skin off your hand. So for a watershed, what you're looking at honestly is the land that sheds its water to the river. So in this picture you're seeing right here, you're looking at the Delaware River watershed, the Delaware Basin. So all the land that is highlighted in the Delaware Basin is land that when rain falls on that land, the rain will roll off down the hill to the lower elevation, which is where the river is. So the Delaware River Basin includes land from New York, from Pennsylvania, from New Jersey, from Delaware, and from a very little piece of Maryland. All of this water gets to the Delaware River, and there's actually an organization called Delaware River Basin Commission that has representatives from all 4 states, maybe 5. I'm not aware how much Maryland is involved with this. And all of the representatives make decisions about how to protect the Delaware River so that the Delaware River is healthy and clean enough to use, and so that each of the state gets the resources that they need. For example, in Philadelphia, we need to have drinking water from the Delaware River, and in August, we tend to not have enough rain that would give us the water that we need naturally. And so what's going to happen by the negotiation and the management of this large watershed, the reservoirs upriver from where we are catch the rain in May and April when we have a lot of rainstorms. They hold extra water in the reservoirs, knowing that they can release that water to the river in August, keeping the river flowing full enough that we get the water that we need in Philadelphia. And a specific technicality in this is that the salt line from the Delaware Bay is kept low enough in the Delaware River, south enough in the Delaware River, that we have plenty of fresh water in our water intake in Philadelphia. There's a lot of details to that I'm not going to go into right now. The main information is that this large watershed provides plenty of water for our use, and this large watershed and this resource of water is shared by 4 states. When you think of a watershed, don't think that if you're in one watershed, if you go somewhere else, you're not in a watershed. Wherever you are on the earth, you are standing in a place that when it rains, the water's going to go somewhere. So therefore, you're in a watershed. If you look at the state of Pennsylvania, there are 3 major watersheds, and there's 3 little pieces of watersheds that the state of Pennsylvania is involved with. We're in the Delaware River Basin watershed. If you go west of here, you go to the Chesapeake Bay watershed, which is the Susquehanna River Basin. You go west of that, it's the Ohio River Basin, and the Ohio River ends up joining the Mississippi River. So rain in Western Pennsylvania actually gets down to Louisiana. So when you hear about flooding in New Orleans, some of that rainwater might have actually come from Pennsylvania. So the point of this is that no matter where you are, you're in a watershed, and wherever you are and you're drinking water, you may want to pay attention to where that water's coming from. The Potomac River Basin, the Genesee River Basin, and the Lake Erie watershed are small pieces of watersheds that tend to be in other states. If you come back to Philadelphia and you look at our one Delaware River watershed, but just a piece of it where the watersheds are specifically, the sub-watersheds are in Philadelphia, please notice that there is no watershed that is only in Philadelphia. The watersheds don't stop at a municipal boundary. So for all of the watersheds that come through Philadelphia, the higher ground, the higher elevation is outside of the city, and the water is coming into the city. So going from the northeast to the southwest, you have the Pequessing Creek watershed, the Pennypack Creek watershed, Tookonee, Frankfort Creek watershed, Wissahickon Creek watershed, which is the one that you're going to be most interested in, the Schuylkill River watershed, and the Cobbs Creek, Darby Creek watersheds. The Wissahickon Creek watershed actually joins the Schuylkill River, and therefore, technically, the Wissahickon Creek watershed is also in the Schuylkill River watershed. When the city of Philadelphia was deciding where we're getting our drinking water, there actually was a discussion in the 1800s, the mid-1800s, about whether we would get water from our rivers and clean the water, or whether we would get water from the Pine Barrens in New Jersey and pipe that water into Philadelphia. And the forefathers decided that the best decision was to use the water that we have right here. So the 2 largest sources of water for us are the Delaware River and the Schuylkill River. So one of our drinking water treatment plants, Baxter, gets our drinking water from the Delaware River, and the other 2, Queen Lane and Belmont, gets our drinking water from the Schuylkill River. The Wissahickon Creek, when the Wissahickon Creek water comes into the Schuylkill River, that is right where the intake for Queen Lane is. So the Queen Lane drinking water treatment plant, they've done some studies, and about 90% of the water that is used at the Queen Lane drinking water plant is from the Wissahickon Creek, just because of the flow of how the water moves at that point. I also want to point out that the different watersheds actually have different characteristics and different sort of personalities to it. For example, the Pequessing Creek watershed has a lot of land that is not developed in the density that you would have in the Tookonee, Frankfort Creek watershed. So when a watershed has more development, more houses, more built up streets, that's going to impact the creek, and it's going to impact what's going on around there. And we'll come back to that a couple different times, particularly when we're talking about combined sewer. Okay. The Wissahickon Creek watershed itself, here's a map of it. It is outside of the city and inside of the city. It includes an area which is the Fairmount Park. And so you have quite a bit of greenery in the area. In fact, there is some evidence, and probably at the Wissahickon watershed, Friends of Wissahickon, you know this more than I do. I believe that the Wissahickon Creek is less healthy as it comes into the park, and it is more healthy as you move through it. I'm not 100% certain about that. So what are the responsibilities that Philadelphia Water Department has? The Water Department has three main responsibilities. We are providing high quality drinking water for all of Philadelphia. We are managing the sewage, the wastewater for all of Philadelphia and some of the suburbs. And we're managing the stormwater through some of the pipes we have underground, but also with what's happening above the ground. This slide that you're looking at has the red dots, which show you where the drinking water treatment plant, the three drinking water treatment plants are, the green squares, which shows you where the sewage treatment plants are, and the darker area of Philadelphia, which shows you where we have combined sewer. And I will talk about that in a little bit. Notice that the Delaware River is running along the edge of Philadelphia. And also notice that you really don't have, or be aware that we really don't have a line that says where's Philadelphia and where's the suburbs in terms of how water moves. You can read the information about how much water we treat. You can notice the information about the Green City Clean Water, which we'll talk about in a little bit, because the Green City Clean Water program is helping us manage stormwater in a way that is actually more effective than what we have done in the past. I want to point out one other thing. The drinking water treatment plants, particularly Belmont and Queen Lane, they are on higher ground. And the sewage treatment plants along the Delaware River, they are on lower ground. So just by the location of where the treatment plants are, we are working with the environment to the best effect. It's important to understand our water use cycle, because we are in fact directly relating to our world right here when we are drinking water and we are making the water dirty. So wherever you are in the world, when you're drinking water, you're using a resource that is from that location. So for in Philadelphia and in many large cities, we're using drinking water that is going to come from surface water. And for Philadelphia, the obvious surface water is from the rivers. So the water that we're drinking comes from the Delaware and the Schuylkill River. It goes by pipe to one of the three drinking water treatment plants. It goes by pipe after it's cleaned to your homes and your schools. That pipe is called a water main. At your homes and your schools and your businesses, after you use the water, one pipe takes the dirty water, the sewage, to a sewer pipe, and that sewer pipe takes the dirty water to one of the three sewage treatment plants. At the sewage treatment plant, all of the solids that are in the sewage are removed and the sewage is disinfected so that the water can return, which means water flowing out. The effluent goes to the river. Now, mind you, the river is flowing from, I'm going to say, from the left of the screen to the right of the screen. I'm not sure if you're looking at exactly the same screen I am or whether it's reversed, but the water is flowing from the river side to the riverside. And so therefore we're getting the drinking water from the cleaner section of the river. And when we clean the water, it's going to the slightly dirtier section of the river. But when we're putting the water back in the river, it is by law required to be cleaner than the river. So keep that in mind. And keep also in mind that as the Delaware River is flowing south, flowing to lower elevation, there's not a lot of that water that flows back north in tide. So what that means is that even though the water is coming from the river and going back to the river, you are not drinking your own sewage. You are drinking new water that's coming down the river that's being piped into the drinking water treatment plant. Now, of course, the cities upriver from us are also doing the same thing. So there is the reality that their water that you're drinking has been in someone else's sewage at some point. Thank goodness that the water department cleans your drinking water to high quality. Thank goodness that this resource is available to us and we are not running out of water.